In this video, we will be analyzing the exercise known as the upright row with squat. We will be discussing the muscles being activated, the planes, axes of rotation, types of muscle contraction, joint movement, line of pull, and the nerve innervating these muscles. This exercise will be split into 3 phases: Phase 1, Phase 2, and Phase 3. Ankle. Phase 1. Preparatory phase. The ankle joint is making contact with the ground, creating a closed chain movement. This is when the distal end of the extremity is fixed, preventing movement of any one joint unless predictable movement of the joint. This movement is known as dorsiflexion. The main muscles that isometrically contract the ankle are the anterior tibialis and the ankle. Phase 2. Action phase. Entering the action phase, the ankle joint continues to be in a closed chain movement. The ankle joint is concentrically plantar flexing as a gastrocnemius, and the soleus shortened to return the leg to the upright position. At the end of this phase, this joint is in an isometric contraction to maintain stability, prevent injury of the ankle. This movement occurs in the frontal plane and sagittal axis. Ankle. Phase 3. Final phase. The ankle joint remains in a closed chain movement. The ankle joint is eccentrically plantar flexing as a gastrocnemius, and the soleus lengthened to return the leg back to the starting position. This movement occurs in the frontal plane and the sagittal axis. Preparatory phase. The knee joint or the tibiofemoral joint is classified as a ganglionic joint because it acts as a hinge. The hamstring muscles allow knee flexion in an isometric contraction. This movement occurs in the sagittal plane and in the frontal axis. Phase 2. Action phase. Entering action phase, knee flexion transitions into knee extension with the help of the quadricep muscles in a concentric movement. In knee extension, there is no true synergist muscles, but the gluteus maximus and the soleus can be classified as synergists during this closed chain movement. The knee also internally rotates 10 degrees as this movement occurs in proper alignment. This movement occurs in the sagittal plane and frontal axis.
Knee. Phase 3. Final phase. Entering the final phase, knee extension transitions into knee flexion back to the starting position with the help of the quadricep muscles and hamstring muscles in this eccentric movement. Knee will externally rotate approximately 10 degrees to achieve proper alignment of the tibial and femoral condyles. This movement occurs in the sagittal plane and frontal axis.
Hip. Phase 1. Preparatory phase. The hip joint is classified as a ball and socket joint, allowing multi-axial movements. This functions in weight bearing and has a wide range of motions. Starting the exercise, the hip is in flexed position while slightly abducted in an isometric movement. The pelvis is anteriorly tilted. This occurs in the sagittal plane and frontal axis. Hip. Phase 2. Action phase. Entering the action phase, the hip joint transitions into extension with the help of the hip extensors in a concentric movement. As the movement occurs, the pelvic rotates posteriorly as the upper leg adduct. The extension movement occurs in the sagittal plane and the frontal axis, as adduction occurs in the frontal plane and sagittal axis.
Hip. Phase 3. Final phase. Entering the final phase, the hip joint transitions back into flexion with the help of the hip flexors in an eccentric movement. The pelvic tilts back anteriorly to the starting position. This eccentric movement occurs in the sagittal plane and the frontal axis.
Preparatory phase. The trunk is divided into two segments, the anterior muscles and the posterior muscles. In the starting position, the abdominal muscles are neutral with isometrically contracted, while the posterior muscles are in neutral position as well. Keep in mind that the spine has to maintain a neutral position to avoid injury for correct performance. This isometric movement occurs in the sagittal plane and frontal axis. Phase. Entering the action phase, the trunk muscles stay in neutral position once again to avoid injury and for correct performance. As the trunk stays in neutral position, the hip joint flexes, resulting in a flexion movement of the whole trunk. This movement also occurs in the sagittal plane and frontal axis.
Trunk phase 3, final phase. Entering the final phase of the trunk continues to stay in neutral position back down to the starting position and is performing an eccentric contraction. The hip joint returns to extension with extension of the whole trunk. This movement occurs in the sagittal plane and frontal axis.
Glenohumeral joint, phase 1. Preparatory phase. The glenohumeral consists of the shoulder joint and the scapula. The shoulder joint is a multi-axial ball and socket joint and is most mobile joint in the body. Starting phase 1, there is a shoulder flexion and a slight abduction in an isometric movement. This movement occurs in the sagittal plane and frontal axis. The scapula consists of 3 joints: the sternoclavicular joint, the acromioclavicular joint, and the scapulothoracic joint. Starting phase 1, the scapula is protracted isometrically with a slight depression. This movement occurs in the frontal plane and sagittal axis. Glenohumeral joint, phase 2, action phase. Entering the action phase, the shoulder will show abduction with slight flexion. This concentric movement occurs in the sagittal plane and frontal axis. For flexion and abduction occurs in the frontal plane and sagittal axis. With this movement, the scapula retracts, which occurs in the frontal plane and sagittal axis. The scapula also upwardly rotates with slight elevation in the frontal plane and sagittal axis. Glenohumeral joint, phase 3. Entering the final phase, the shoulder eccentrically adducts, maintaining slight flexion. Flexion occurs in the sagittal plane and frontal axis, while abduction occurs in the frontal plane and sagittal axis. During this phase, the scapula performs downward rotation, abduction in the frontal plane and sagittal axis. Elbow, wrist, and hand, phase 1, preparatory phase. The elbow joint is closely associated with the humeral, ulnar, and radial humeral joint, and is classified as a ganglia or hinge-type joint. Starting phase 1, the elbow is extended isometrically and the wrist is in neutral position while the hand is pronated. This occurs in the sagittal plane and frontal axis. Elbow, hand, and wrist, phase 2. Action phase. Entering the action phase, the elbow transitions into flexion while the wrist performs ulnar deviation and the hand is still pronated. Flexion occurs in the sagittal plane and frontal axis, while abduction is in the frontal plane and sagittal axis. Pronation of the hand occurs in the transverse plane and long axis. Elbow, wrist, and hand, phase 3. Final phase. In the final phase, elbow returns to extension. The wrist returns to neutral position with the hand in formation. The movement occurs in the sagittal plane and frontal axis for the wrist and elbow. The hand occurs in transverse plane and the long axis.
Forgive me for my wrongs, I have just begun.